What's up everyone, this is going to be a quick video about the updated version of the ability to mark multi-parameter directories and loop metadata to create reference expressions inside for each loop for my parameter utilities inside Houdini. So basically this update initially was, I think it was like last week ago, and as I started to work with, I do ran into a couple of problems that I wanted to improve. And basically, this is a version 2.2. Basically, spent an entire day to make it better. And I just want to go ahead and show you how to work with it right now and what's the improvements, because there are quite a few of them. So let's go through this for each loop. Let's set it up and see what improvements has been made. So first of all, again, as in previous video, I want to go ahead and mark my folder and also the metadata node. So inside here, I'm going to take my metadata node. I'm going to use it as a mark as set as loop counter. So this doesn't have to be a metadata node. You could also have like a null node inside here, and maybe even a wrangle node if you modify your for each loop somehow. Basically, you could basically mark this counter node, this metadata node. Basically, it doesn't have to be this for each count metadata node. You can mark any, as long as this attribute changes in the for each loop value changes, that corresponds to the IDs of the IDs of the multi-parameter indexes for the parameters. It can be basically any node can be used as a counter node, but it is important that this is these attributes that changes are actually in the as a detail attributes, and these are integer. So in this case, just to demonstrate, I'm going to mark it as I'm going to mark this set as loop counter node, this one. Now let's go ahead and mark our multi-parameter folder, which is this, in this case, these boxes I have set up. Set as loop multi-parameter. So we have set our two values that we need to set. And let's go ahead and start working and start adding some variations for the loop. So first of all, I want to distinguish all of both of these objects, which going to come with the from this name from this name attribute. So let's go ahead and start referencing this name attribute inside the multi-parameter. So let's go here. Let's say this name again. Now I want to basically reference either the loop multi-parameter as a spare parameter, which is basically any geometry that is connected to through the pin inputs, or as a spare parameters with the negative values that has been referenced. So in previous version, this tool would always create a spare parameter if basically if no spare parameters are referencing the counter node. But in this case, let's go ahead and connect our counter node as an input tree. And basically we have already direct reference to our counter node that we need for our expression from the pin inputs, and we do not even have to create we do not even need to create a spare input to reference this counter node. So this is the one thing in the update. So we do not need basically we check all the inputs for the nodes. Basically any inputs from 1, 2, 3 and onward is valid to be referenced, and any spare parameters that are already set up also valid. So in this case, since we have already referenced our node, we are not going to create a new spare parameter if we use to set our spare parameter. So let's go ahead and say we want to create our spare parameter. So and now another update has been is that I make sure that I also check for all the subdirectories inside the multi-parameter. So in the previous versions, any basically subdirectories in the multi-parameter wouldn't be picked up, because basically there's each folder holds its own parameters, and in previous versions I didn't pick them up. Basically I didn't search for any folders inside here and then extracted those parameters. So but in this case I'm actually doing it, and the function inside the tool is actually recursive. So you can basically have as many subdirectories as you want inside your multi-parameter directory, and as long as they are not also multi-parameters, all the parameters are going to be picked up. And what's cool about this, that I am now also referencing the folder that this parameter is located, because sometimes the names can be basically the same for the parameters, and it is a good idea to see from which folder you are actually picking your parameter to reference from. So this is also a big improvement in the workflow. So in this case, I know that this is from the boxes folder and name, accept. And again, now we have to check, basically we need to extract this counter attribute. So in this case, I'm going to make sure that my 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 first instance of the parameter is going to be 1. So that's 1. And for my my multi-parameter starts with a 0. So that means that if I want to use if value, which basically start value is going to start with a 0, and that means I want to add to this e value 1 to match my starting index of the multi-parameter. So I'm going to check the e value plus 1. So if you, let's say your multi-parameter starts, if you set it as it starts with a 0, then you do not have to change it, because the indices of the multi-parameter starts with a 0, and your start value also, e value attribute also is 0. But in this case, just to demonstrate, I'm going to have basically different difference of 1, and to show how to handle it, I can just e value plus 1, accept. And that's basically it. We have created our reference here, and let's go ahead and give it this name, box 0. Let's go ahead and add our box 1, and this should create a primitive attribute. You see we have big box 0 and box 1, and then we are using align and distribute to split them by name attribute. And that's pretty much it. We have created our expression, and you can see, since we had a direct reference to our counter node, we are referencing inside the expression that gets the detail attribute e value. We are using a pin input 2 instead of creating a spare parameter. Let's go ahead and delete this, and let's do it again. In this case, I do not have any expression, basically any connection. I do not have any direct reference already on the node to our counter node. Let's go ahead and say, let's press this again. Use pair name e value plus 1. You can see in this case we didn't have it, so we created a new spare input, and we are referencing, since the spare input reference starts with -1, we have created, and now we are basically the same thing happened, but we created this spare reference, this dotted line. So that's a big improvement from the previous versions, where we didn't check for any direct input pins that could be counter node connections to the nodes. So that's a big improvement actually. Let's actually go ahead and connect this back to maybe input 3. Let's go like there. Let's go ahead and delete this parameter. So if you have this package, you also have ability to remove parameters. And actually let's go ahead and make this start value 1. Now my start value is going to be 1, and my start indexes for the multiparameters are also going to be 1. So in this case, I am going to say, let's go ahead and say I want my name, but in this case I do not want to add 1 to the e value, I just want to use e value. You can see it's basically the same thing, expression has been correctly set up, but in this case we are using a detail 3 input because our input has been changed to the 3. So that's basically automatically handled. And another way to reference these parameters would be using, instead of these pair inputs, basically pin inputs, we can reference it by relative string, basically by using the relative path to this node instead of the index 1, 0, basically index 1, 2, 3 that represents pins, or negative value that represents spare inputs. Let's go ahead and try to reference it by relative. So if we reference by relative, again, name, so in this case we have e value set correctly. You can see in this case, instead of the index of the input or spare parameter, we are using the / null 4, and null 4 is this. So basically it's the same thing, except we have referenced it by relative path. But you do have to be basically you have to be careful, because if you change the name of this parameter, so in this case it does update, but something like if you change the name of the folder that actually holds the multiparameter, I think is going to break, because the way that the expression is because we basically use a plus sign and plus sign, and this string is not being basically updated with the name of the node that holds multiparameter. So be careful about that. So let's go ahead and reference our size attribute. So in the size, let's go ahead and say, let's go ahead and in this case, I'm going to use, okay, so I have to remark my null node since I basically re renamed it. The reference that is being held inside the reference name that is being held for this node has not been updated, so I have to go ahead and mark this as a loop counter again. So if it doesn't find the exactly the same name folder node that has been set as basically, because only thing that we do with these setting of these loop counters is we are setting environment variable, which is a string and is not dynamic. So in the future there might be ability to basically dynamically hold the objects of the counter nodes and multi-parameter folders as an object in an instance of the Houdini, but in this case you still have to make sure that you do not rename these nodes. So let's go ahead and set our size. You can see in this case I have only one option to select to set this attribute as a size. So as you basically, let me cancel. So in this case I did basically trigger this menu option from the label of the parameter, and that means I want to set all three indices of the parameter. And since I have only one vector parameter that is a size of 3, which is a size parameter, multi-parameter, it's going to show me only that one. Accept, so eValue, that's fine. And now we are setting our sizes. Let's go back here. So our sizes works just fine. So next up is next up is ability to pick the individual indices from the multi-dimensional parameter. So in this case, I have my random scale parameter, which is a vector 2. I have two vector 2. But for something like attribute adjust, the parameters actually float attribute values are actually separated by mean and max values. If I want to, in this case, I want to set scale for my instance points. So what you can do is if you select, basically if the thing that you select is a size of 1, in this case it's 0, you can see that all the multi-dimensional parameters are being separated into its own menu option. In this case, you can see that I have my random scale parameters in the instance boxes directory, and I can select either the index 1 or 2 and use it as a reference. I do not have to I don't have only ability to select from one from the same size parameters as I had in this case where I wanted to set a value of a vector value. So I want to go ahead and say scale 1 eValue, that's fine. Let's go ahead and say another one's pair. Now I want to index 2. And that's pretty much it. We have now set up our random scale. Let me go ahead and make these maybe make this box maybe a little bit bigger. So the align and distribute node is a little wonky. It basically moves a lot with the moves geometry a lot. So I just go ahead and say the scale is going with 0.1, 0.1, and maybe 1. So basically, you can see we are now creating references and we have this vector reference, but in reality we are separating them into two different parameters inside the loop. So that's actually also very useful to have. So the scatter, let's go ahead and use the scatter. Again, use a spare. So the box is count, I think this should be the box count. So again, I have to also, the name has been set up. So what else is left for me to set? Oh, the seed value for the P scale. Seed, I'm going to use a spare. Seed, E value, that's fine. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Let's go ahead and say 200, 200 size, just to make sure that these actually work. So the scale, oh, I didn't set up also scale for the box. Uniform scale, again spare, box scale, E value, that's fine. Let's take a look at the scale value. It's also been set up more or less correctly. Let's make more scatters, just to make sure that all the values actually do connect. Also the seed value also works. And then so this is the first one. Let's go ahead and say, let's make this box also. So the size, this is a way bigger one. So the scale, how many points we want, random scale, that's fine. Okay, just to make sure that all these parameters work. And two more things that I wanted to talk about is how to correctly set up your multi-parameters. So first of all, if you go to my multi-parameter that has been set up with all these parameters, you want to make sure that this hashtag or pound is at the end of the name. So sometimes if you don't pay attention, the Houdini can create something like a multi-parameter with this name, and it's going to accept it also because there's a one hashtag that basically is dynamic for each loop, and that's fine. But since the logic inside the script doesn't accommodate anything, basically it accepts that this pound is actually at the end of each multi-parameter. So make sure that you set up your multi-parameters like that correctly. And another thing that you can do is actually add to the existing parameter that is already set up. So I didn't test it all the way, but in theory, if you have something like a name 0, and if you put your name something like a 0, so the name has been set up as 0. Let's take a look at it. So 0 and 1. So we have basically set up we only 0 and 1 name. But let's say my base name is box and underscore. Let's go ahead and try to add to this value that has been already set up using this expression pasting. So what you have to do is go ahead and say and press Control and say hold Control when you press either spare or relative reference. Let's use name and e-value. And you can see we have basically we have not deleted this value that has been already set up. We are just appending to it. And you can see your base name is still correct, and we are creating box underscore and these values. And this should also work with uniform scale. In this case, let me go ahead and let's delete this uniform scale. Let's say my scale is 10. In this case, I want to add plus. And now I want to go ahead and press down the Control, spare, scale, e-value. You can see the 10 has been kept, and we have set up our expression correctly. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much it for this video. I mean, you go ahead and download this update. I'm going to put it out right now, and please give it a star and use it to your liking. It's completely free, and I think it's really cool. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.